Well, hello there. We are back on the oceanic shore for this trip down mysterious music. On today's video, we will embark on an exploration of lost music. From forgotten demos to cancelled albums and falsely stolen master tapes, this journey is so vast, we might just need a few more stops along the way to get to the bottom of it. Like a season of Lost. Is that too irrelevant to reference in 2021? Welcome to the first episode of the Sets in the CD Lost Music Deep Dive. An odd one to start off on, the national anthem of the Moldavian Soviet Socialist Republic from 1945 was rewritten in 1981 and officially relinquished in 1991 after the fall of the Berlin Wall, as the lyrics of the anthem contained references to the Soviet Union and Joseph Stalin. Curiously, the original lyrics were actually lost after the anthem was relinquished, and I thought that I was messy. The anthem was originally only preserved in instrumental form, but after the lyrics were eventually unearthed in 2016, numerous versions were re-recorded, which is more than I can say for my mysteriously lost unpaired pairs of socks, and what would have become the Smile Sessions. Smile was originally meant to be an ambitious follow-up to the Beach Boys' psych-pop masterpiece, 1966 Pet Sounds, although it remains famous today because its particularly delicate production process was a catalyst to frontman Brian Wilson's 2-year mental breakdown. Constant overhype and group infighting led to the project being postponed and then scrapped when the Beatles dropped Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Most of the recording sessions were eventually released in the Smile Sessions box set in 2004, but some remain unheard, which we may explore in a future video. In addition, the original multi-track recordings of Good Vibrations, a song that was planned to be on the album, were allegedly destroyed during a spring cleaning session, leaving only the mono master. These record companies really do as much damage as I do when they clean up, jeez. Thankfully, engineer Derry Fitzgerald eventually lended his help to write a program that would isolate and extract each track from the masters to create the stereo versions that Brian Wilson wanted to release in 2012. Not too long after, in 1967, psychedelic rock icon Jimi Hendrix left the A-side master of his album Axis Bold as Love in the backseat of a London cab, which was never recovered and had to be remixed to meet the release deadline. To replicate the original mixes, engineers had to reference a damaged wrinkled tape recording of the original session, smoothing out the wrinkled edges with a shirt iron to actually hear it. The remixed version is the only one we can listen to today, and it's the one that the final record ended up having mastered. Additionally, Jimi began recording his last album, First Rays of the New Rising Sun, in 1970 before his death. It was intended to be a double album, but was only released in 1997 as a compilation of the surviving master tracks from the recording sessions, mixed as close as possible to Jimi's original vision. It is unknown how much of the original record was completed, or how close the final album ended up being to what we were meant to be hearing all along, which is a similar predicament the Velvet Underground found themselves in. After the art rock pioneering band, the Velvet Underground, had released their third self-titled album, they immediately returned to the recording studio to make another record. However, due to a large number of professional and personal differences, the recordings were scrapped and the album never surfaced. 1985's BU compilation collected some of the tracks for a widespread release, and the 2014 reissue of the third album also included a bonus disc with remixed recording session tracks, although the original album was never fully recovered. Kind of like that one Art of Noise track. Beatbox is a single by the electronic 80s band Art of Noise, with extensive variations and remixes. The original was an instrumental experimental piece, which sampled car key ignitions, Falling Drain Water, and progressive rocker Alan White's drums of the band Yes. After the original version became popular, Art of Noise decided to capitalize by expanding it and adding on more instruments and sounds, creating numerous alternative versions that they would call diversions. The version that was subtitled Diversion 4, however, was lost, and only a fragment was ever released on the band's 2010 compilation album Influence, without anyone fully hearing the complete track. We also only got one taste of a particular version of Aha's Take on Me, which was originally known to have gone through several variations as well. But there is one that, unlike the rest, never really got released and was only heard for a few seconds in a 2005 documentary. It was supposedly recorded in 1983 and sounds very different from the final version. An instrumental version of this demo was uploaded to YouTube, but the complete version heard in the documentary has yet to resurface. In a similar mysterious position is hip-hop producer and rapper Dr. Dre's original track, Die Motherfucker Die, which was originally intended to be a track for his debut album The Chronic, but was never finalized and remains completely lost. A remix was completed and never fully officially released, though it was eventually leaked online. Supposedly, the original version has been left unfinished, with only 2 verses recorded to this day. And we might also never hear the few demos from pop superstar Madonna's explicit 1992 album Erotica that didn't make the cut and are now known as the Rain tapes. 2 songs from said tapes, titled You Are the One and the Jitterbug, were attempted to be reconstructed by fans. Jitterbug, which was originally going to appear in the Madonna movie A League of Their Own, was leaked in 2019, and the other tracks eventually followed as well. Which we cannot say about So Many Styles, one of Eminem's earliest tracks recorded on tape before he reached mainstream success. No new revealed audio of the track has ever been leaked online apart from a 30-second snippet, making it unclear whether it's still available, since Eminem now owns the rights to all of his early recordings after hip-hop magazine The Source leaked an old racist track without permission. So if he's not releasing it, maybe there's a politically incorrect reason as to why. Less controversial are the earliest known Muse recordings, which come from a demo tape from 1995. The tape was auctioned twice, but fragments for all 4 albums have been eventually published on YouTube, including a full version of the song Backdoor. The first auction was won by drummer Dominic Howard's ex-girlfriend, who held the tapes hostage and didn't want to share recordings of them, while the second went to an avid collector. Only 3 copies of the tape are now known to exist, which didn't see the heavy bootlegging that the Grateful Dead did. With their dedicated fan base and excellent live performance reputation, the Grateful Dead's breakup was a shock. The band was in the process of recording a follow-up to their 1989 album Built to Last when frontman Jerry Garcia passed away in 1995. The group had considered finishing the album in preparation for an eventual release, but the project was abandoned. Due to said dedicated fan base, some live versions of the tracks that would have eventually been featured on the album do exist, but have never been officially released, and can only be heard as low-quality bootlegs. Thankfully, Jeff Buckley was just as popular. Despite only releasing 2 albums before drowning in 1997, singer-songwriter Jeff Buckley gathered a cult following in the 90s. My Sweetheart the Drunk was meant to be Jeff Buckley's second album, but he passed away in the middle of production. In 1998, the album received an unfinished posthumous release, under the title Sketches for My Sweetheart the Drunk. Buckley had originally scrapped extra material he was unhappy with, but a handful of the thrown-out tracks have surfaced in scratchy quality on YouTube. His mother released a lot of high-quality demos after his death, and several bootlegs, like his earliest recordings from 1998 and live tracks from Shanae, the coffee shop that made him famous. In 2004, a special edition of Buckley's first album, Grace, was released, including Forget Her, a track that he had previously refused to release because it was too personal, and a duet with dream pop band Cocteau Twins, released on a Various Artists compilation album. A number of rare covers have also resurfaced throughout the years, kind of like they had for the Beatles. In 1997, the remaining members of the pioneering 60s rock band The Beatles wished to record new material for the release of their anthology series, but didn't want to work without John Lennon, who had already died by then. Reaching a compromise, they were given his demos left for Paul McCartney, recorded in 1978 by his widow Yoko Ono, to overdub and release. The songs Free as a Bird and Real Love were completed, but George Harrison wasn't happy with another third track, Now and Then, which was shelved. Approval by his estate was never given to continue working on the song, but it has since resurfaced as a bootleg online. And we go back to Madonna, but this is her objectively unquestionably best album, so the dedicated segment was warranted. She mentioned in an interview that the original version of Ray of Light, the second single from her 7th album, was over 10 minutes long before it was cut for commercial radio release. A 7-minute demo version was eventually leaked onto the internet, so it is possible that Madonna herself just misremembered the original cut's length. Anders Kosefny originally acted as lead vocalist of heavy metal band Slipknot before Corey Taylor took over. Several demos from his time have been reported to exist, but only a few made their way online, including a version of the Make, Kill, Feed, Repeat album featuring Anders' vocals as opposed to Corey's. And while we're on the topic of previous reincarnations, Popstar Pink's former R&B girl group Choice recorded an album which was shelved in the late 90s and only had a handful of songs released. Some featured in a few soundtracks and one appeared in Pink's debut album Can't Take Me Home. The album is currently circulating and snippets have been uploaded onto YouTube, thankfully, for anybody who wants to hear it. unlike what happened with the Red House Painters. The final more lighthearted album of slowcore band Red House Painters, Old Ramon, was released in 2001 and went through a troubled production that stalled for years, and got the band dropped from their label, Island Records, altogether. No other label wanted to buy it until Sub Pop finally agreed to in 2001. It was originally intended to be a double album, but the unused tracks and longer versions have not been bootlegged and remain lost to this day. Like a handful of Aqua tracks. Throughout their prolific career, Danish dance pop darlings Aqua left a number of lost recordings behind. Here Comes the Birds was a song performed live on the band's 1998 tour, which was expected to be on their second album Aquarius, although it didn't make it, and only exists as a low-quality live bootleg. In addition to it, the band claimed that they wrote 50 tracks for Aquarius but only chose to release the best 10, which means that the other 40 have never resurfaced, if they even exist in the first place. Not to mention the several songs that were performed at live shows prior to the recording of the band's cancelled third album, whose recordings that are known to exist are lo-fi bootlegs, although a few have seen an occasional release as a B-side here and there. Kind of like what happened to Nas. Hip-hop artist Nas recorded the Prospect album The Death of Escobar as the death of his alter ego, before it was scrapped in favor of releasing the Stillmatic album in 2001. Death of Escobar was likely some kind of introduction album, while Stillmatic was intended to be a rebirth album with contrasting style respectively. Luckily, all tracks have since resurfaced on other releases, particularly the compilation The Lost Tapes in 2002. Which hasn't exactly happened for Shaquille O'Neal. Basketball player Shaquille O'Neal had a rapping career he sought to revive with the 2001 album, Shaquille O'Neal Presents His Super Friends Volume 1. Yes, there were going to be more of these, in collaboration with Pink and Dr. Dre, amongst others. Singles were released which hinted at ambitious production but subpar rapping. After being slated for a September 11 release, yikes, the album was shelved, though some of the singles have since been leaked to YouTube, and demo versions of the album have been uploaded on several file-sharing websites. Although unlike Frou Frou, I guess they don't get to say that they've taken on VR. Frou Frou was a British electronic duo made up of vocalist Imogen Heap and producer Guy Sigworth. Despite only releasing one album, Details, several songs that the duo recorded are still unreleased, and only a couple of demos circulate online. The song Guitar Song, nicknamed The Holy Grail of Frou Frou songs, was performed live for the first time on The Wave VR, which specializes in musical experience and concerts for virtual reality users. The actual demo still remains unreleased to this day. I thought this day would never come, but here we go. I'm about to lose my entire fan base and talk about Ed Sheeran's first EP, Spinning Man, which was recorded and burned in CD format by himself when he was 13 years old. What is this channel? I'm either talking about extremely obscure acts or literally Ed Sheeran. There's really no in between here. Most songs were about Sheeran's girlfriend Claire and his teenage breakup with her. Some of them were made available on Ed's EP from 2005, The Orange Room, but others have not been released. And speaking of pop musicians, Original Doll was an album by Britney Spears slated for another 2005 release. After calling in to Kiss FM requesting them to play music from it, Spears arrived at the radio station carrying a chihuahua and barefoot. In an impromptu interview after the song Mona Lisa was played, she revealed the name of the album being Original Doll. The label later denied the legitimacy and readiness of the record to be played on live radio, although Mona Lisa was eventually remastered and released as a B-side. Unfortunately for all the Britney stans, it's likely that the album will never be released due to complications around Spears' contract under the label. But who knows? Maybe her new plea for freedom will revive interest in it. And maybe interest will also be revived in the recorded tracks by alternative rock band My Vitriol, which were originally intended to be a follow-up to the 2001 album Fine Lines. Something along those lines eventually came in the form of a mere 4-track EP in 2007 called A Pyrrhic Victory. The unreleased songs were partially found through a 6-minute track that sampled audio meant to appear on the full-length version of the album, although 5 of them have never been fully released. Which I guess is the fate that Calvin Harris was eagerly hoping for on the eve of the release of his 2009 album. In 2009, electronic producer Calvin Harris supposedly lost his laptop in Heathrow Airport in London, which contained an entire album's worth of material. Harris offered £750 in form of a reward for its return, but nobody came forward. He eventually admitted that he had fabricated the entire incident, and that the theft never happened, all because he needed extra time to work on his album before the release deadline actually came. But at least it did, which is more than we can say for Arcade Fire. Director Spike Jonze had asked Win Butler of prolific indie band Arcade Fire to help compose some of the music for the film Where the Wild Things Are in 2009. While the music recorded is unconfirmed, all that is known to exist is an acoustic re-recording of the song Wake Up from their 2004 debut, Funeral. While test screenings did happen to use the band's music in place of the film's actual music, the final product though ended up using songs composed by Karen O from the Yeah Yeah Yeahs and other musicians, with many left to wonder how an Arcade Fire composed score would have sounded on the film. Imagination that we won't need for Imagine Dragons. One of the songs amongst the early independently recorded and who knows, maybe actually good music of the alternative rock band Imagine Dragons is Lost. The 3 EPs the band recorded before landing a record deal with Interscope have gone out of print. However, some of the songs from those EPs were reworked on their first full-length album, Night Visions, while others have appeared online since then. One of them, I Wish You Well, was recorded in a studio and partially released to the public and teased in a 2010 podcast segment. For anybody interested, a live recording of the song in full also exists. And for more questionable rock, the song Rocket was announced for the album Wizard, a rock project between Kid Cudi and Dot the Genius. But while it was performed in its promotion, it was not included on the final release of the album. Confusingly enough, the lyrics were listed on iTunes as those for an instrumental track from the album, leading many to believe that it was actually included. Although if you're dying to hear it, a low-quality recording of the song from the original Ustream broadcast does exist, and has been since found, making less of a statement than the Foo Fighters did in 2011. Foo Fighters frontman Dave Grohl, formerly of Nirvana, along with the rest of the band, intentionally cut the master tapes of their 2011 album Wasting Light into hundreds of pieces, which were enclosed in the packaging of the album to give their fans a part of the physical release as a subversion of the typical frenzy that surrounds the ownership of master recordings, and I guess a rebellious statement. While the recordings were preserved digitally, the original tapes will never be heard again, just like the original version of JoJo's mysterious third album. The planned third studio album by American pop and R&B singer JoJo, Jumping Trains, was cancelled due to her ongoing legal battle with her then label. Most of the songs were eventually leaked on the internet and resurfaced once JoJo was released from her contract with Blackground Records, but the planned music videos were never found, like the extra Melanie Martinez tracks. Pop singer Melanie Martinez recorded at least 50 songs for her debut album Crybaby in 2014, but many were not officially released due to not fitting with the album or just not being high enough quality. 4 of these tracks remain completely lost, but almost all have been found and released now, so who knows, maybe they'll turn up soon. Unlike Once Upon a Time in Shaolin. Once Upon a Time in Shaolin was an album made by the rap collective Wu-Tang Clan, recorded in secret over 6 years. It was marketed as the last Wu-Tang album to ever be made and featured every living member at the time. Only 1 copy was pressed, the rest being barred from commercial distribution for 88 years, a reference to the group's affinity for the number 8, to make it feel more like an art piece from the Renaissance. It was auctioned for $2 million to infamous entrepreneur Martin Shkreli, which made it the most expensive album ever sold, although many snippets do exist online. Per contract, Shkreli could only play the music at live events, but only did so at Trump's win of the 2016 United States presidential campaign, sadly enough. Almost blasphemously enough.
Yes indeed, yes indeed. So we gonna hold court.
After Shkreli was found guilty of fraud, he forfeited the album to the United States Justice Department. And the fate of Shaolin is thus unknown. And on that uncanny note, we invite you to follow us on the next phase of our descent, where we'll explore even more lost music mysteries. This time, we'll focus on those that have never even seen the light of day. Subscribe to the channel to keep up with this crazy journey and know exactly when the next video will be up. A special thanks to the patrons supporting the channel. If you also want to get your name in the credits and access exclusive future episodes and bonus streams as well as uncensored videos, consider joining us on there to satisfy your cravings. Follow us on Twitter to keep up behind the scenes, and check out the Spotify playlist below to descend deep down the lost music iceberg. We'll see you soon for more stories behind the music.